Before we get started, I just want to say, I'm going to spoil the shit out of Death Stranding. If you haven't finished the game and want to remain spoiler free, go finish the game, then come back and watch the video. Okay, starting in 3, 2, 1, here we go.
But I'll keep coming.
I love Death Stranding. I also hate Death Stranding. It's a game that takes place in a world riddled with loneliness and melancholy, yet there's a breathtaking sense of beauty and wonder that constantly surprises you at every turn. It's also a pretentious and frustratingly drawn out project that uses monotony and repetition as a gameplay hook / narrative device throughout its experience. And that's one of the key things here. Death Stranding is, at least from my perspective, much more of an experience than it is a game. I've revisited and subsequently rewritten my script for this review nearly a dozen times, and maybe this version of my final review won't end up being the best possible summation of my thoughts on the game, but we're 4 weeks past the initial release of the game, and if I don't have a review out before mid-December, then it's probably not going to happen at all. So for this review, we're just going to have to wing it and hope for the best.
It's time for Death Stranding.
Death Stranding is unlike anything I've ever played, and that's probably one of the biggest compliments I can give to it. It's unique and easily stands out from the crowd of games that I've played from this generation, and it's the type of experience that I'll continue to think about as we grow closer and closer to the next generation of gaming. In 2016, when Sony put on one of the greatest E3 conferences of all time, Hideo Kojima made his grand return to the industry after his catastrophic breakup with Konami around a year prior. Kojima graced us all with a teaser for his new project, Death Stranding. The teaser was shrouded in confusion and vagueness that ended up being one of the most talked about reveals of the show. For me personally, I was hooked solely due to it incorporating both Norman Reedus and Guillermo del Toro, both of whom were meant to collaborate with Kojima on the cancelled Silent Hills project. Damn it still hurts to talk about that. After 3 years and a mega-jillion trailers, Death Stranding has finally released, and it is one of the most polarizing titles in years. It seems as if people either love it or they hate it. What's most interesting is that the praises and criticisms for the game often overlap, with some loving certain design choices and others hating those same choices. Once again, it's a divisive product. I think this is one of the reasons as to why I've had such a hard time coming to a decision on how I feel about Death Stranding. It's almost like I've been subliminally conditioned to believe that I either have to love it or I have to hate it. But I keep falling somewhere in the middle. Death Stranding is without a doubt one of the best looking games this generation. The art direction and world design are absolutely stunning. As mentioned earlier, there's the sense of isolation that follows you through every step of your journey. And there are moments of pure beauty that more often than not left me in total awe. I can't praise the world that Kojima's team has created enough because it was one of the few things that kept me pushing forward. My only criticism here is that I would have loved to see a little more variety in the abandoned structures that we find along the way. Like, it would have been really awesome if we had the opportunity to find some underground bases or hideouts that were unaffected by the timefall rain. It's a minor criticism, yes, but it is something that I've thought about a lot throughout my 45-hour playthrough. And Death Stranding has one of, if not the best soundtrack I've heard this year. The licensed tracks that come from Low Roar, Churches, Bring Me the Horizon, and others are perfectly paired with the tone and setting of the game. Some of the best moments with the game came from the integration of the music into your journey. While not always the smoothest integration, these songs really complemented the dramatic feeling of the journey that I was on. Now when it comes to the journey itself, You'll cross mountains and valleys with weather ranging from cloudy skies to severe blizzards. I would have loved to see a day-night cycle with the game instead of being stuck in some sort of never-ending overcast, but this wasn't something that really bothered me until I got closer to the finale. Without getting too far into spoilers yet, Death Stranding's story is nonsense. It's pure nonsense. My first 5 hours or so with the game left me incredibly overwhelmed by the lore and the terminology that the characters were throwing around in the most Kojima of ways. But browsing through the in-game emails and interviews helped give me a little more information as to what exactly the characters were talking about. It can be very confusing at times, and this is in part due to Kojima's style of writing, which is often criticized for being heavy-handed and convoluted. Death Stranding is no different. You'll have countless exchanges with characters that seem to exist solely to explain things to Sam that he either already knows or that he should already know. Each of these characters do get their time in the spotlight, but they often exhibit sudden shifts in dialogue, going from conversations that feel authentic and purposeful to spouting exposition like it's a handful of singles at a strip club. In Death Stranding's final hours, the mystery finally unravels and the veil is lifted. Cliff is revealed to be Sam's dad, Bridget and Amelie are actually a singular person split into two entities, and Sam removes Lou from the pod and chooses to raise it as his own child. Oh, and Lou is also revealed to be Luis. When all was said and done and the story had its loose ends tied up, Death Stranding left me in something of an emotional train wreck. The cinematics, the dialogue, and the performances are absolutely perfect in these final few moments. The payoff is well worth the frustrations and annoyances that I dealt with, and genuinely made me want to give the game another go, now having a better understanding of how the story concludes. It doesn't change that the story is often delivered in the most convoluted and ham-fisted way possible, but it all does come to a satisfying conclusion. Also, I just want to say that Mads Mikkelsen and Troy Baker are just... damn, man. It's good really good The only other performance that contends with those would probably be Tommy Earl Jenkins, although hearing him say America for the 100 millionth time made me want to skip every bit of his dialogue. But the biggest question on everyone's minds going into Death Stranding revolved around its gameplay. What kind of game is it? What exactly do we do in Death Stranding? Well, that answer is nowhere near as complicated as you may think. Now, I know I'm way late on talking about this game, and most, if not all of you, know by now what kind of game Death Stranding is, so I'm not going to go over a lot of details about the moment-to-moment gameplay loop. In short, Death Stranding is essentially a walking, hiking, delivery simulator where you take on various delivery orders from outposts all over the country. These deliveries range from menial items such as pizzas and beer to critical items such as medicines and research materials. You'll have to carefully plan out your journey by charting your own routes across the map and equipping yourself with tools that will make your journey as smoothly going as possible. This preparation stage was one of my favorite parts of the game, and I loved having to plan out where I was going as well as the routes that I was going to take. What's even better is that once you've visited a region of the map, structures and items left by other players will appear in the area, making return trips through those regions much easier. This brings me to the multiplayer aspects of Death Stranding. The game forgoes any form of traditional multiplayer modes like co-op or competitive, even though neither of those would really work here, in favor of doing this sort of shared world approach. Items and structures that you build or leave in your game will appear in other players' games and vice versa. While you'll never come across any players physically present in your game, they do have a constant effect on your game, just as you do theirs. Crucial items will drop to you during boss fights, and players will be able to add crafting materials to structures such as safe houses and even full-on roads. It creates a sense of anonymous cooperation, if you will, and it was easily my favorite part of Death Stranding. I took a serious detour from the story in Chapter 3 and spent hours just collecting metals and other materials in order to construct a roadway. I had a total blast with the multiplayer elements in Death Stranding, and I hope we can see this kind of thing implemented and improved upon in future Kojima projects, provided it fits within the narrative. As you journey across the wasteland, you'll come face to face with multiple different types of enemies, such as paranormal entities known as BTs or beach things, acid rain which rapidly ages everything it touches, and crazed delivery folk who will relentlessly chase after you to steal all of your cargo. But the biggest opposition that you will face in Death Stranding is the world, the very world itself. The world is harsh and punishing. It's demanding and unpredictable. You have to be deliberate with every step you take, every move you make, and every breath you take, because the game will be watching you. Yes, I know that was a terrible joke, but I'm working on running a Tales from the Loop campaign, and 80s music is the only thing on my playlist at the moment. Now, when it comes to dealing with each of the aforementioned enemies, the only thing that provides much of a challenge in Death Stranding is traversing the environment itself. The BTs and the crazy delivery guys called mules are a breeze to deal with. Boss fights were incredibly underwhelming and were nothing short of repetition. Create distance, throw blood grenades, shoot blood bullets, rinse and repeat. And mule encounters were even worse. If I wasn't using the ridiculously overpowered bolo gun, I was button mashing the shit out of them with hand-to-hand combat. Rather than fighting enemies, you can go with a stealth option, but that's also very easy. It only became even more of a breeze once you began acquiring assault rifles and grenade launchers. The combat is ultimately one of the biggest detriments to this game. I often tried to avoid it if at all possible, and dealing with the late game bosses were more boring than exciting. And that's where my dislike for Death Stranding truly lies. I said earlier that I had something of a love-hate relationship with the game, and while there are so many aspects of the game that I love, I was just bored for the majority of the game. I never found the experience to be cathartic or relaxing as I had heard a lot of other reviewers say. And really, I didn't find the experience to be all that rewarding except for the revelations at the very end. At the core of Death Stranding, though, you're going to be doing the same thing over and over and over again. You'll take on an order, deliver a package from the place where you took said order to a different part of the country. That's all there is. And after 30 or so hours with the game, the basic gameplay loop really started to wear on me. I was happy to finally be done with the game, not just because I really liked the ending, but because I was ready to move on to other things. I know this video is a bit more jumbled than my previous reviews, but this is the best explanation I can give for how I feel about Death Stranding. It's a complicated thing to discuss, but it shouldn't be given special treatment just because it's a Kojima game. There were times where I really enjoyed Death Stranding, and there were times where I couldn't stand Death Stranding. Maybe in the future I'll give the game another go and we'll have more of an appreciation for it, but as of now, I just think it's alright. That's really all I can say. If I have to give Death Stranding a rating, I'd go with 12 Silent Hill pachinko machines out of 18. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and a comment telling me what you thought of it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and want to see more content. I've got 4 videos planned for this month and the beginning of January, including my favorite and least favorite games of 2019, as well as my most anticipated games for 2020. So make sure to keep an eye out for those. See you on the next one.